trainers, Professor Palm here, and I want to welcome all of you back to Dragon Dynasty. This is going to be a really fun month where we talk about dragon types. But another thing I want to welcome you all to is video 400. That's right. Thanks to all of you for tuning in, I have made it to 400 videos. I really cannot believe I've made it this far, but I didn't do it alone. I have all of you to thank. And one last thing I want to welcome you to is my final video for the Alola region, because next week I'm moving to Unova. I'm going to be moving to the region of dragons. I'm really excited, but at the same time, I'm a little bit nervous. While I've already welcomed you to 3 different things, I'm going to welcome you to a 4th thing, and that last thing is welcome to Pseudo Study trainers. Since we're in the Year of the Dragon, Dragon Dynasty, and it's video 400, I think that we should talk on a very special dragon-type Pokemon. After all, a lot of us love having a powerful dragon by our side. They're some of the hardest Pokemon to train and also raise, as they evolve at staggeringly high levels. But after you get there, it's totally worth it, and you feel like you're on top of the world. And seeing that so many of you have been with me from 1 to 400 videos, I think I should do a very special treat for all of you today. For this series, we're going to look at every pseudo-legendary Pokemon that was introduced from Generation 1 in Kanto all the way to Generation 9 in Paldea. For those of you who are returning to the series, I welcome you back. I'm glad to see you again. But for those of you who are new to the series, or also new to the world of Pokemon and you don't know what pseudo-legendary is, allow me to explain. It's very simple. You see, pseudo-legendary is a term coined by fans, and it refers to any Pokemon that has a 3-stage evolution line, has a base stat total of exactly 600, and requires exactly 1,250,000 experience points to hit level 100. We've met a lot of pseudo-legendary Pokemon out there. We've met some that have big hearts and are always there for their trainer, and even strangers that just want to do anything they can to help them. But unfortunately, as the pendulum swings both ways, we've met some rather violent and cruel Pokemon that are pseudo-legendaries. Whether they are flying high in the sky, claiming an entire mountain as their own, or destroying everything around them, it just shows how powerful pseudo-legendary Pokemon can be. But if you want to see just how brutal and fierce a pseudo-legendary Pokemon is, well, look in the sky, because one of those things is bound to be flying around. Never make eye contact with it, or it'll mark you as an enemy and destroy you in 1 second. Now, of course, talking about the brutal dragon itself, Hydreigon. When the Unova region introduced this Pokemon, it was unlike any other. It was a terrifying dragon-type Pokemon, because anything that it looked at was destroyed instantaneously. People say that 3 is a magic number, and with Hydreigon, that's the case, because this Pokemon causes 3 things: annihilation, brutality, and destruction. Whatever it sees, it destroys. There are so many violent Pokemon out there, and Hydreigon is one of, if not the most violent Pokemon and pseudo-legendary ever. I once said that Tyranitar has a very brutal and insolent nature, destroying mountains and cities. Well, with those 3 heads Hydreigon has, Tyranitar doesn't even have half of that power. So, did you know that in Japan, the dark type is known as the evil type? Well, I guess it'd be a little obvious if you look at your dark type Pokemon cards and energy. I guess it's also a little more easy to see when you look at your Pokemon's icons, the dark type, and see the angry eye. But I think one of the easiest way to see that is when you terrestrialize your dark type Pokemon. It gets spikes on its head, and that icon with that evil grin. Well, if Pokemon was trying to make an evil Pokemon, they succeeded with Hydreigon. I don't think I've ever met another wicked Pokemon like this one. I think that Ghetsis was being nice. As unhinged as Hydreigon is, you do not want to see this Pokemon go berserk. Other than with its unique typing, Hydreigon is unlike any other pseudo-legendary Pokemon. Not just because it's a very hard Pokemon to raise, but it's also a very hard Pokemon to get through to. There are so few trainers out there that own one and actually have it on good terms. Most of the time, this Pokemon destroys everything. Even its own trainers will even fall victim to its own blasts. This Pokemon really deserves some more observation, so that's what we're going to do today. For video 400, we're going to talk all about the most brutal pseudo-legendary Pokemon, Hydreigon. But before we do that, HTTP Koopa, I want to give you a very special thanks and shout out for my jersey. Today's jersey is the Dragon type jersey. Since we're in Dragon Dynasty and we're talking about a Dragon Pseudo-Legendary Pokemon, I couldn't think of a better shirt to wear than this one. If you like the jerseys I wear in my videos, you can buy them on his Etsy shop. I have a link to it in the description below, so please check him out, and I hope that you buy a shirt from him. Stop buying those silly stock image t-shirts and buy something really cool. Also, please tell him Professor Palm sent ya. I'm not sponsored, but I still want to say thank you for all you've done and all you've helped with this channel. Oh no, Hydreigon saw you. I think it's best that you run away. I can only hold it back for so long. It's really an aggressive creature. It's trying to get free, so let's talk all about Hydreigon and see what makes it one of the most powerful pseudo-legendary Pokemon of all time. Here we go, talking about the Brutal Hydra itself, Hydreigon. Run! For the Hydreigon family, or the Hydreigon line, whichever you prefer to call it, it's a 3-stage evolution. For this violent dragon family, we begin at the first and basic stage with the little aggressive dragon, Dino. Then at level 50, Dino undergoes evolution and evolves into its middle stage of the destructive Zweilous. With its twin heads, it causes double the trouble and double the damage. And finally, at level 64, we end this dragon's vicious journey when Zweilous undergoes evolution and evolves into the Brutal Hydra itself, Hydreigon. All in all, you need to get to levels 50 and 64 to experience this destructive dragon attack. And this is one of the most merciless lines to get. Hydreigon's line currently owns the crown for highest level of evolution, as there's no other Pokemon that has even come close to taking that title from them. Back in the Generation 5 games when this line first appeared, while we had rare candies, getting them to levels 50 and then 64 was a whole nother story. You had to battle like crazy in order to get a Hydreigon. And once you did, I'd say at that point, you're pretty much invincible because you have one of the most brutal dragons by your side. And with all that effort you put in, you can now proudly call yourself a Dragon Master. Hydreigon are very rare to be found in the wild, but for its habitat, they don't have a set one, as Hydreigon lives high in the sky. They're always on the move. However, all Pokemon eventually need to settle down and recharge, and when they do, Hydreigon will settle down in ruins or abandoned places because it likes to feel empowered and in charge. Sometimes these abandoned places or ruins were made because of their unstoppable rampage. They also give outsiders a fair warning to stay away. Because of their destructive nature, they will attack anything that moves. If you see a Hydreigon flying in the skies around these areas, or you see it in the ruins, hold still, hide, or get away, because you don't want to see what terrible power 3 dragon heads have together. The first games Hydreigon ever appeared in were Pokemon Black and White, as well as its sequels, Black 2 and White 2. While its previous evolutions could be found in the Unova region, Hydreigon could not be found anywhere. The only way to obtain yourself a Hydreigon was from the basics, by going to Victory Road and finding yourself a wild dino. But be careful, these Pokemon are very rare to find. Or you could just wait 2 years later and look in the new Victory Road and find yourself a Zweilous in the wild, who are also just as rare. Then all you need to do is evolve them and bingo! You've got yourself one of the most brutal Pokemon of all time, Hydreigon. The first games you could catch Hydreigon fully evolved in the wild was in the Kalos games, Pokemon X and Y, where, just like its previous evolutions, Hydreigon can be found at Victory Road, but not through any random encounter in the cave. It can only be found through the Sky Ambush mechanic. And even if you manage to get the Sky Ambush, you have to be lucky, because encountering Hydreigon is a 5% chance. For the lore of Hydreigon, Hydreigon is based on the Greek monster, the Lemurian Hydra, who you may remember from Hercules, as it was the second monster Hercules went against for his 12 labors. Hydreigon is also based on Yamada no Orochi, which is depicted as a red-eyed, 8-headed dragon or serpent in Japanese mythology. When looking at Hydreigon, while it has 3 heads, the rest of its wings represent the other heads. Hydreigon also resembles Jmi, who is a cunning, deceptive dragon or serpent depicted in Slavic folklore. This time, it's depicted with either 3 or more heads, and the presence of its smaller heads on top of its arms are very reminiscent of hand puppets. According to the Pokédex, Hydreigon has a ferocious nature, as it solves all its problems with violence. Hydreigon also has a sadistic disposition, as it enjoys seeing the suffering of all its opponents after a very hard fight. Hydreigon flies in the sky, and despite those small tattered 6 wings on its back, Hydreigon flies perfectly. In fact, Hydreigon can fly around the entire world without stopping in just a single day. Hydreigon is also triggered by movement, and it will attack anything that moves to show its power, and it believes almost anything that comes towards it is an opponent. Despite having 3 heads, the heads on Hydreigon's arms do not have brains. Hydreigon uses all 3 heads to consume and destroy everything. When hungry or on a rampage, Hydreigon will demolish and devour everything in its path. When Hydreigon uses its heads for attacking, they all take turns sinking their teeth into their opponents. These attacks will not cease until the opponent goes down or stops moving. Despite being a destroying machine, Hydreigon is actually very intelligent. It's said that the center head has 3 times the brain power. It also adapts to strategies immediately and thinks faster than a supercomputer. Sadly, it only uses its mind for battle strategies. Despite being able to see, unlike its previous evolutions, Hydreigon is unfortunately just as blind, as its mind is always clouded with thoughts of rage and aggression. This makes it hard for anyone to get through to it. Even the most skilled of dragon tamers have a very hard time talking towards one of them. There are also a slew of stories about villages that were destroyed by Hydreigon. It's even said that Hydreigon grew ferocious because people in the past loathed it, and they also considered Hydreigon to be an evil incarnate, so whenever this Pokemon appeared, they attacked it immediately. Every pseudo-legendary Pokemon is unique, and Hydreigon is no exception, as it's one of the most destructive and frenzied dragon Pokemon we have ever met. We sure have learned a lot about this malicious 3-headed dragon. Now, let's talk on a few little tidbits and fun facts about Hydreigon. While all dragon pseudo-legendaries that are dual typing have the dragon as their first typing, Dino, Violet, and Hydreigon are the only pseudo-legendary line that have the dragon typing as their secondary typing. Hydreigon is the signature Pokemon of Team Plasma leader Ghetsis, and this marks the first and so far only time that a pseudo-legendary has been under the use of a main antagonist. Also, in Pokemon Black and White 2, it's revealed that Ghetsis is a horrible trainer with Pokemon, as when his Hydreigon uses the move Frustration, it does maximum damage. Hydreigon and Dragonite are the only 2 pseudo-legendary Pokemon that were introduced before Generation 6 that lacked Mega Evolutions. Despite being introduced in a generation that introduced hidden abilities, Hydreigon is the only pseudo-legendary to date that does not have a hidden ability. Hydreigon has more wings than any other pseudo-legendary Pokemon, as it has 6. Also, it was the first pseudo-legendary Pokemon that could learn the move Fly, despite not being a flying-type Pokemon. Hydreigon shares its category name with Sharpedo, as both Pokemon are known as the Brutal Pokemon. On another really cool note, both Sharpedo and Hydreigon are Dark-type Pokemon. Currently, Hydreigon is the only Pokemon that has heads for hands. And, according to Ken Sugimori, originally, Hydreigon and its line were supposed to be more represented about tanks. If you look very carefully at its underbelly, you'll notice that Hydreigon has marks that are very similar to tread marks marked on tanks. So yeah, it still does have a little bit of the tank side to it, which I think would also make a great Mega Evolution if they had it. Also, on an interesting note, when Hydreigon attacks, its entire purple side of it lights up. Hydreigon seems like an unstoppable dragon. Anything that crosses its path is destroyed. However, like almost all Pokemon, it has a few weaknesses, and Hydreigon is weak to moves that are Fighting type, Bug type, Ice type, and Dragon type. But these are only ×2 weaknesses to it. Hydreigon has a horrible ×4 weakness. And that major ×4 weakness to Hydreigon is none other than Fairy type. Because of Hydreigon's typing of Dark and Dragon, Fairy type moves are super effective against it. Well, we saw all of Hydreigon's weaknesses. Why don't we turn things around and see what makes this Pokemon so invincible and check out its strengths. Being a Dark and Dragon type Pokemon, Hydreigon has a few strengths when it fights. This is what shows how unstoppable it is. And it's strong against Pokemon that are Dragon type, Ghost type, and Psychic type. only 3 strengths against 5 weaknesses. Well, that may not be the best thing ever, but hey, this Pokemon still is an unstoppable brute. And Hydreigon also has some other bonuses with it. Because of its dual typing of Dark and Dragon, Psychic type moves won't do any damage to it. So yeah, Psychic is also a complete immunity to Hydreigon, but also has one more. And Hydreigon's other immunity is to moves that are Ground type. All thanks to its ability Levitate, Ground type moves won't do any damage to it whatsoever. Check that out! 2 immunities to this Pokemon. Way to go, Hydreigon! Every Pseudo-Legendary Pokemon is unique and powerful in their own way, but there's something about Hydreigon that makes it stand out from the rest. I guess because of its design. Hydreigon looks like it's been through many battles and never lost. However, its body, on the other hand, looks like it's taken so much damage, especially with those tattered wings. Or, I guess you could say that this Pokemon has a very malevolent feel to it, unlike most others that have a violent but powerful feel to it. Looking at Hydreigon, you can tell that those glowing red eyes means that it will destroy everything around it. While Pokemon with multiple heads is nothing new, I'm glad that after all these years, we finally got it with dragons. However, Hydreigon's heads for hands make it one of the coolest Pokemon of all time, and also the only one, as we've never seen this ever happen again. Sometimes people say that multiple-headed dragons can cause double the trouble, but with 3 heads that Hydreigon has, I'd say make it triple. With just how violent Hydreigon is, I don't think its category name, the Brutal Pokemon, does it justice. I think that this Pokemon should be categorized as the Berserk Pokemon, because it looks like the Pokemon equivalent of that word. And honestly, I'm all for that, as we really need some powerful Pokemon like this. This is one Pokemon that can bring so many victories and is completely unstoppable. Just like with Dragonite, a part of me wishes that Hydreigon had been given a Mega Evolution. I really would have loved to have seen the tank aspects that Ken Sugimori originally wanted to do used for its Mega Evolution. That would have made it a really cool design. But there's a part of me that's glad it did not get Mega Evolution, as it's already an unstoppable beast capable of so much devastation. And if you can see the devastation it does now, I don't want to imagine how unhinged a Mega Hydreigon could be, especially with all the damage it could do. Seeing that we just got Hydrapple in the DLC makes me even more hopeful that we get another Hydra Dragon Pseudo-Legendary in the future. While Hydreigon may be the most violent Pokemon of all time, I think it's worth it going on this ruthless journey. When it comes to one of the most ruthless Pokemon that you could ever get, at least it'll always bring you victory without any mercy. You'll never find another Pokemon like Hydreigon, because it truly is the most brutal of all Pseudo-Legendary Pokemon. Welcome back, trainers. I appear to have calmed down my Hydreigon, who knew that all it wanted was just some belly pats. So yeah, sometimes these Pokemon can be real softies underneath that horrible berserk and violent nature. Well, I hope that you enjoyed learning a lot about Hydreigon, but before we end, I just have a few questions for all of you. Do you think that the Unova region should have gone down the Hoenn route and had not 1, but 2 Pseudo-Legendary Pokemon with Hydreigon and Haxorus? Or do you think Hydreigon was good enough just for 1 Pseudo-Legendary Pokemon? When it comes to Pseudo-Legendary Pokemon, who's your favorite of all time? Also, which Pseudo-Legendary Dragon type should we get next? Did you ever happen to go on this ruthless quest to get a Hydreigon, starting with Dino, evolving it into Zweilous, and then finally getting a Hydreigon? Or did you happen to find one somewhere else in the wild to get lucky? Do you think that we need more multiple-headed dragon Pokemon like Zweilous, Hydreigon, and the new Hydrapple? Or do you think that one-headed dragons are better? If Mega Evolution ever does come back, do you think that Hydreigon and Dragonite deserve Mega Evolutions? Or would you say that Hydreigon deserves something else, like a regional variant or even a signature move in the future? And at long last, out of all the Pseudo-Legendary Pokemon we have, who do you think is the most violent and brutal of them all? I hope that you enjoyed learning about this berserk beast of the sky. There is no other Dragon-type Pokemon quite like Hydreigon. Well, if you liked what you saw, then please leave a like. If you have any questions, you want to answer any of the questions I threw at you, you want me to cover another Pseudo-Legendary Pokemon, you want an idea turned into a video, or you have an idea of what dragon I should cover for the Year of the Dragon, then please comment. And as always, if you liked what you saw and you want to see more, smash that subscribe button. I just want to thank you once again for 400 videos in the Alola region. I had a wonderful time with you, trainers. Well, I'll be seeing you all in the Unova region. Now, if you excuse me, I'm gonna go pack. Palm out!